Welcome to the Net Zero Scotland Community Podcast Series, brought to you by Scottish Business Network.
Welcome to this edition of the podcast. It's my pleasure to say that we are going international in this one. We have an expert in sustainability and social purpose in Pam Cone, who works for Amity Advisory. Welcome, Pam. Thank you very much for doing this. Can I ask you first off to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, thank you very much, James. It's my pleasure to be here. As James said, my name is Pamela Cone, and I have been working in the space of professional services firms my entire career, going on 30 years now. First in marketing and business development, but the last 5 or 6 years with a renewed focus on social impact and sustainability. So I work part-time as the Global Social Impact Officer for a global consulting firm, actuarial consulting firm called Milliman, and then also have a practice to advise and counsel other professional service firms on social impact and sustainability. So more than keeps me busy.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And to start off the discussion between us is very much, we've talked quite a bit about net zero. Net zero and sustainability sometimes go hand in hand, but sustainability is a much broader topic than just net zero. And you're not here to talk to everyone about net zero, but it'd be very keen for everyone to understand how you see sustainability in its broadest sense and what that means for professional service firms.
Yes, I definitely use the term sustainability in a much broader sense, not just climate related or environment related. To me, sustainability covers the long-term viability of society and of businesses. So one of my favorite quotes is, businesses cannot survive in societies that fail. And so when we're talking about sustainability and viability, I'm talking about what do we as businesses need to do to ensure successful societies going forward so that we as a business entity can survive. And, I think we're in the midst of some examples right now that are proving the point that businesses have a hard time thriving in societies that are struggling. And one of those components is climate, of course. Many other components include, social unrest, access to justice issues, all of these, and pandemics. I mean, all of these things are testing how businesses approach survival. And so it's evidence that we're living right now that long-term viability and sustainability is more than just the environment.
And in terms of sustainability and social purpose, is one the same as the other, or is there a different definition between the two?
In the way I use the word sustainability, they're very much interchangeable. Social purpose, social impact, sustainability of your business. I use all of those interchangeably. I think the way most people, when they use the word sustainability, they're talking about carbon footprint, net zero, environmental issues, and certainly it applies there as well. But I think of social impact and social purpose and that whole movement as the steps companies are taking for long-term viability and sustainability.
Understand. And I guess the obvious question for this is why is that a particular priority, or should it be a particular priority for professional service firms?
I am of the belief that it definitely should be a priority for professional service firms, because I think the privilege of working in professional services and having a professional career, what comes with that is the obligation and the responsibility to help our clients, to help our firms, to help others, solve societal problems. And certainly the United Nations Global Goals provides a good framework for firms to help in that regard. They provide a good framework for firms to establish their own plans. But I think as a profession, we could and should be leading the work that needs to be done to address societal problems. If not us, then who? we should be at the table. We should be at the head of the table in having these conversations. So I see it as, yes, this is something important to professional service firms themselves, but yes, this is something important to professionals because we can also help our clients, and we touch many, many industries in the work that we do, and we can influence accordingly. The other reason I think it's important is sort of the obvious one, is societal expectations. And professional service firms are starting to see this from their clients, certainly. I think for a long time, professional service firms believed that all of this environmental movement and carbon footprint, and it didn't really apply to us, right? We don't have smokestacks. We don't extract natural resources from the earth. We don't dump things into the river. We don't employ slave labor. So we, for many decades, I think, thought it didn't apply to us. But our clients feel differently. And our clients are starting to, as part of their RFP process, ask very pointed questions about social impact programs, sustainability practices, et cetera, because we're part of their supply chain. So clients are certainly increasing their focus. And then, of course, employees and other stakeholders in your communities are expecting action from their companies. Companies used to be able, particularly firms, used to be able to fly under the radar screen on social issues. That's not the case anymore, because the expectations of stakeholders are that of leadership. They expect leadership out of the firms they do business with.
Excellent. And one of the things that we're seeing increasingly here, I don't know whether it's similar with you, is employees, especially young talent, and there seems to be a growing expectation that they will work for a firm that has a social purpose, and I guess probably slightly more than some other sectors is the professional service sector seems to have a greater responsibility to show that social purpose to people coming to join it. I don't know whether that's something that you've seen as well.
That's very true here as well. And I think some of the older generations, myself included, had expectations of their employers when it came to volunteering opportunities or occasional philanthropy. I think the younger generations recognize that occasional volunteering opportunities or philanthropic gestures are important, but woefully insufficient to address the challenges facing society today. We are never going to solve societal problems through altruism, because there's a limit to how much people can volunteer or how much people can give. But if your company itself, if your firm itself is in the work that it does with clients, promoting sustainability, promoting progress on social issues, that is sustainable, right? Because that's work that is part of our business model. And I think that's what the younger generations are expecting now. Not that social impact is a side project, but that it is strategic and core to the business of the companies they choose to work for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a very much an increasing trend that we see as well. One of the questions as well about bounding social purpose and sustainability is, where do I bound it as a professional services firm? Is it in the activities that I undertake, or do I have to include the activities and the impact of the clients that I advise as well? Is their activities and their impact part of my social purpose, or can I draw a wall between myself and my clients?
I think eventually I would like to see firms do both, because yes, it's important what my own firm does, and certainly that has to come first. But as I mentioned earlier, the fact that the professions touch every other industry in the world and advise every other industry in the world, we have tremendous influence over the decisions that our client entities take. And to not leverage that in a way that would help solve societal problems, I think is a missed opportunity. So I think there's two components to social impact and sustainability for professional service firms. One is what are we doing as a firm? And are we a leader? Are we setting an example? But two, how can we advise, help, and encourage our clients to also make decisions that will have a positive impact on society?
Understand. So, because we're seeing a lot in the financial sector of capital, investment capital aligning behind sustainability, I guess driven by carbon emissions, but some of the broader aspects of sustainability that you've mentioned. And I guess that is driving some people with a stick. I would imagine with professional service firms, it's probably more of a carrot approach, isn't it? We would be looking to exclude people from polluting or bad industries. It's about helping support and guide them more. Would you agree?
I agree. However, I do think that at least what I've seen in the last 3 to 5 years is clients have more of a stick, because clients are looking at their outside service providers and in some cases making decisions about which firms to work with based on how seriously they are implementing social impact and sustainability programs. So the stick can come from the other way. And then I was going to say one other thing about your question, and now it's escaping me, but I do believe that law firms and accounting firms have the ability to help their clients also become more sustainable. So for an example, the pushback I sometimes get from a law firm is, well, I see what you're saying, Pam, but you know what? We represent oil and gas companies, and so we can't even have this conversation. And my response to that goes back to what I said earlier about sustainability and long-term viability. Okay, so you represent the fossil fuel industry. Where are they going to be 10 years from now? Where is your client base going? And how are you as a law firm going to survive if you don't help your fossil fuel clients figure out what's next? All of the fossil fuel industry is going to have to figure out what's next. At least that seems obvious to me. And law firms could be in a position to help them do just that, rather than stick their head in the sand and hope it goes away, because it's not going to go away.
No, absolutely. And I think it'd be interesting because if you look at the audience that we have here, we have a wide range of professional service firms. And I think some of our audience would say, well, if you're involved in oil and gas, that's an obvious one. But most of my client base is private clients, and I do probate and family law and asset buying, etc. So it doesn't really apply to me, does it? It's I'm shielded from this. What would be your view on that?
I would say none of us are shielded from this, unfortunately. And I would also say that this pandemic has taught us a lot, because even if you're a trust and estates lawyers and you only work with private clients, my guess is that pre-pandemic, you were still contributing substantially through air travel and other things that you do to serve and meet with your clients, that we have all come to learn in the last 6 months perhaps wasn't so necessary. The biggest carbon footprint contributor of professional service firms is air travel, or was air travel pre-pandemic, almost exponentially so. And law firms and other professional service firms historically have focused on things like recycling their paper and composting in the kitchen and no single-use plastics, all of which are important. But if you look at the materiality of those things versus air travel, they pale in comparison. So I think even professional service firms who aren't representing fossil fuel companies, but other industries still have a big role to play in looking at their own carbon footprint and figuring out how they can do things more efficiently. And the pandemic is teaching us it's possible. So my hope is that no firm rushes back to what we used to think of as normal, because it wasn't. We, as you know, far outlive our Earth's capacity by April of every year, and that isn't sustainable. So yeah, the pandemic is forcing our hand, And for that, we should be grateful.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, we've certainly seen a lot of, I guess, points of proving through the pandemic. And certainly talking to a professional service firm earlier this week, they would never have suggested having a Zoom call with one of their clients because they would have felt their clients would have found it unacceptable. And when you're forced to do it, I think certainly it's shown you that you can communicate effectively when you need to. And certainly the hope is that a lot of that will be embedded within firms as part of normal course of business going forward.
Yep, I agree totally. And I'll give you a great example. Last fall, in my role at Milliman, I was talking to them about this very topic, air travel, and how we need to reduce it. And I got some pushback from, oh, well, we have to travel to see our clients. And my response to that was, okay, so let's start with all of our internal meetings. We travel for internal committee meetings, internal board meetings, internal professional development sessions. We travel a lot just on Milliman business, regardless of serving our clients. And the response I got, well, okay, let's socialize that for a year and get buy-in from the partnership, and then we'll address how to reduce it. Well, the pandemic, again, is forcing our hand, and all of a sudden we all realize that we absolutely did not have to do all of that travel that we were doing for internal committee meetings or board meetings or workshops. And it is also telling us we don't even have to travel that much for clients. And while that has huge benefits from a carbon footprint perspective, I think the other thing we are all discovering, myself included, is it is really nice not to have all that wear and tear on me personally of all that travel we used to do. I mean, it's really nice not to have to pack a suitcase every Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've been guilty of this as well, Pam, but in the past, there's always been a little bit of, I must be important because I've been to 10 cities this week. So if I wasn't needed in 10 cities, then I wouldn't be important. So again, I guess it's showing that you can be equally as important and sit in your spare room and conduct the business that you have, which I think is a real positive.
I think you're so right. There's a real ego boost to being a road warrior, or at least there used to be. And yeah, I'm hopeful that post-pandemic, we all don't rush back to that same mindset for carbon footprint reasons and also for personal health and well-being reasons.
And it certainly seems to be more of the boast these days is I haven't been anywhere for 3 months. So hopefully that's a bit of a positive.
Exactly. It does feel good.
So if we're talking to kind of some of the audience that are thinking about, I haven't started my journey in earnest yet. I'm along the way. That to be simplistic, a lot of the reasons why firms do things is either because they see an opportunity in doing it or they see a threat in not doing it. And your view with social purpose is it an opportunity? Is it a threat? Or could it be both for a law firm?
Mm-hmm. I think it is absolutely both, but it is accelerating towards a threat. Because if you had this conversation with me 6 months or a year ago, I would have told you that I was talking to my clients about how this is a differentiator. Act now, and it will be a differentiator for you. Eventually, it'll just be table stakes. And I use the example of diversity and inclusion programs. Diversity and inclusion programs in professional service firms used to be a differentiator, and now it's the cost of entry. I mean, if you don't have a robust diversity and inclusion program at your firm, you don't even make it to the short list of some of these client organizations. So I think the same thing is, again, 6 months or a year ago, I would have said the same thing is going to happen with respect to social impact and sustainability. Now I'm saying that is happening with social impact and sustainability, being driven by clients, being driven by employees, and being driven by society at large. So I don't think there are RFPs anymore that go out to law firms that don't include a whole section on social impact and sustainability. So it is accelerating fast. Even if you were to act quickly now, I'm not sure it's a differentiator anymore. It's simply just cost of entry. You have to demonstrate that you're taking this seriously and what actions you're taking and how are you measuring outcomes. It's not enough anymore to just list, you know, what I call random acts of kindness. It's not enough to just make a list. You have to have a program in place.
Okay. And in terms of talking to, if I'm running a professional service firm, it can seem a bit overwhelming. That there's a lot to this. There's 17 sustainable development goals. There's the whole context of what my clients do, how I look at that. In your experience, if I was looking to kind of break into the circle and do something that got me moving, something that got me started, that would have enough impact to make it worthwhile, that would actually be able to demonstrate to my stakeholders that I'm serious and that I'm actually moving forwards, would you have some advice on what those steps might be?
Yes. And I would say these are first steps on a journey, not only steps. So first step on a journey, and this is particularly true of firms that have many offices in many parts of the world, is take an inventory of what's already happening, because the chances are pretty good that your offices in their local communities are already engaged doing things, and certainly most offices are already engaged in sustainable practices. So first of all, take an inventory so you know what you're starting from. Second step I would do is to assess the external frameworks. UN SDGs, you know, the UN Global Compact is certainly one of them, but assess them and figure out where your clients are, because the chances are pretty good that your clients are already engaged on this journey and you would want to do something or take steps that are in alignment with and resonate with your key clients. So those are certainly two things you can do that will at least give you some ability to answer some of the types of questions that are coming on RFPs. Milliman actually lost a client a number of years ago because our answers on the social impact and sustainability section of the questionnaire were insufficient for us to even stay in the process for round 2. And that was a current client. And regrettably, it wasn't because we weren't doing a whole lot of stuff. We were. But nobody had collected that information, nobody was tracking it, nobody was measuring it, and so we were not in a position to respond to those questions. So again, the first step is take inventory and understand what your firm is already doing. There's no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You are probably already doing some things that you should take account of and be able to tell that story.
And in terms of, I mean, your experience of best practice, I mean, what are you seeing that people are doing, people are committing to in the wider world?
To me, the best practice is when professional service firms recognize that social impact and sustainability is not something that happens over here, and we do our client work over here. The best practices, and frankly, I can't point to a firm that does this, except Milliman, is when you are assessing your social impact, you need to start with the work you're doing for your client, because that is the biggest impact your company is having on society. It is not your green team, and it is not a group of volunteers that goes out 2 Saturdays a year. It is the work you are doing for clients and how is that impacting society. So to me, the best practice is to start there. And then, oh yes, here's what we're also doing as a firm. But that program is almost immaterial compared to all the other industries you're touching through the work you do for clients.
And we've chatted about this in the past, Pamela, is we've seen professional service firms, I think you mentioned Boston Consulting, PwC, actually making some pretty big declarations recently.
Yes, in fact, just in the last 3 weeks, I've noticed that Boston Consulting Group has announced their plan for net zero by 2030. Just yesterday, PwC announced their plan for net zero by 2030. And just this morning, I saw out of London, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales is also announcing their net zero plan. And they said, we believe we're the first professional association to take such a step. So to me, what that is pointing out is that finally professional service firms and their professional bodies are recognizing that, yes, this does mean us. And yes, we do need to get into this, these commitments and set an example and be a leader. So I think these are terrific steps in the right direction. I haven't seen any of the professional bodies or professional associations in the US yet take that step, but I'm hopeful that the ICAEW will be an example for other professional bodies to follow.
And it certainly seems to be, for a professional service firm, on the opportunity and threat basis, is a lot of this social purpose and sustainability comes enshrined within legislation and also reporting. So if there's legal implications to what I'm doing that are changing, if there's additional requirements, you know, there is the task force for climate related financial disclosure that is starting with listed companies, but that always kind of flows down. Is if I'm a client of my legal or financial accountancy firm, and the law's changing or my reporting requirements are changing, surely I'm expecting my professional service providers to be well ahead of the game and be able to demonstrate that they not only understand it, but have implemented it in their own business.
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything you've said. I would also say that, unfortunately, the regulatory pressure in the US, especially under the existing administration, is not increasing at all. In fact, it's probably being reduced. But what's heartening is to see that many, many companies are still committed to making their carbon goals or to taking strides towards greater social impact, regardless of what our regulatory current regimes are. And so, yes, even in the case where regulation isn't requiring steps in the right direction, companies are still going in that direction. And yes, they're expecting their advisors to be able to help them in doing that. And
I think that's helped as well by a lot of companies. If you're just US bounded, then that might help. That might change in January next year, or it might change in January in 4 years' time. It all depends what happens. But certainly with people like PwC and Boston Consulting, is the obligations for trading in Europe, for instance, applies to them globally, and they can't be unsustainable in the US and still hope to trade in Europe. So I think in some cases, you know, whatever the US choose to do on a personal level, to the extent they participate in a global market, then the best standards will out. So
yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. So we're being helped in the realization that other parts of the world are implementing and encouraging regulations that those in the US that work internationally or globally have to comply with. So that's a really good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And being very practical about it, if there's more legislation or more reporting, isn't this a revenue opportunity for professional service firms?
I certainly think it is. And some firms are actually starting to see that as well. Just in the last year, I can share with you, and this is public knowledge because they put out press releases, Freshfields appointed a partner to a new role called Partner in Charge of Global Client Sustainability. And his job is to help clients address, you know, sustainable issues. And then Paul Weiss also created a brand new officer level role to manage the operations of a client-facing sustainable practice, and then also to manage the sustainable practices of Paul Weiss, the firm. So yeah, it is definitely a revenue opportunity for firms. But having said that, they have to be careful, it seems to me, of being the cobbler whose children don't have shoes. So it's okay to recognize this as a revenue opportunity and, you know, help your clients do this, but then your firm better also address this and be an example, rather than saying, oh, well, we advise our clients on that, but we as a firm, we're not doing anything.
Okay. Fantastic. We're kind of coming up to the last couple of minutes. As I said, it's
Okay.
amazing how fast 30 minutes goes when you're having a great conversation. Would you have any kind of last bits of advice in insights for the audience?
Wow. The last bit of advice is something that we've already talked about. I used to think this was a differentiator for professional service firms, and we are moving so quickly to the point where it is no longer a differentiator, it's the cost of doing business. And so whatever firms can do now to start this journey is going to work to their advantage. I would not recommend waiting till the pandemic is over. I would not recommend waiting until we get back into the offices or we get back to normal, whatever that means. Start the journey now, because the momentum is almost exponential, and you don't want to be left behind. Because this is a journey. It is a long process. For instance, at Milliman, we've been working on this now for 5 years, and I still wouldn't consider us at the point where we're in maintenance mode. So start the journey now. That would be my bit of advice.
And I guess in all practical things, playing catch up is always harder than planning and leading.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Pamela, thank you very much for taking time. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. And we're on a brave new world of podcasts and online meetings, but it's been fantastic.
Thank you so much, James. It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Start your net zero journey today at netzerocommunity.scot.